Theron awoke to the same thing he seemed to always wake up to: silence. Theron didn't mind silence. When it's all you know for decades, it's the lack of silence that becomes appealing. He got out of bed, did his morning meditations, stretched, bathed, and dressed. Same he did every day. Did the same training he did every day, walked up the same mountain pass he did every day. This was just another day of many days Theron spent in the valley of his people. He loved his home, he enjoyed most of the people, but he craved something more. Theron didn't mind for riches, fame, or fortune. Theron just wanted to make a difference. When heading back home for the night, Theron stopped to look across the valley he grew up in. Theron never understood why elves of Greyhawk weren't to go beyond the valley, and he never questioned it. Why? What was the point of all the training and meditation if he wasn't to go beyond the safety of the valley? Theron did something he never did. Instead of walking home, he walked to the wall that surrounded the valley, climbed to the top, and watched the sunset. He felt something deep within him, a longing, but he didn't know for what. Theron waited till he could see the stars, something he also never did. He was happy, yet still felt the pulling of longing within him. Theron watched the stars. They seemed to be all alike, yet also different. Theron wanted to have that feeling. He wanted to be surrounded by people, places, things that were different. As Theron lay looking up at the stars, he heard something peculiar. It seemed as if it were a faint scream. It wasn't an animal he recognized. He tilted his head and strained to make out the animal's call. Then it hit him. It wasn't an animal making a call in the night. It was an elf. Theron leapt to his feet, looked towards his village. He could just make out the faint silhouettes of his people against the backlight of fire. No! Theron dropped from the wall a good 30 feet, rolled, and was off. Theron had never moved this fast, with such desperation. He flowed through the forest, back to his village, back to his people. Theron expected to see people with buckets trying to put out the fire that blazed in the center of town. Instead, he saw them, the drow. Theron had only heard of drow raiding parties, but he thought they were just stories to keep kids from trying to go beyond the walls. This wasn't a story. This was real. This was his home. The first drow to notice Theron looked him in the eyes as he pulled his blade from a village girl. The drow looked unreal to Theron, like an animal that had gone feral, yet it moved with such confidence and ease. The drow was nearly on top of Theron before he pulled his sword from its scabbard. Theron leaped towards the drow, catching him off guard, and rolled behind him. He bent his knees, raised his sword with purpose, and jumped straight up, slicing the drow's right leg clean off. The drow fell to his face and began to cast some type of spell. Theron knew better. Without missing a beat, he followed through with a second strike that split the drow's head in half. Before Theron could look for another target, he felt a prick at the base of his skull. When he pulled his hand away from his neck, he was holding some sort of dart. Not like this. Theron felt his knees give out, felt the warmth of the ground on his face, and then nothing.
Jeff Bigglesworth was born in a small farming town, two fairly dull but hardworking parents. His childhood started out normal until he started receiving visions of life, death, and undeath. When he told his parents, they could offer no explanation and started viewing him with distrust and fear. Soon after the visions began, the Bigglesworth family goat died from choking on a piece of garbage. When Jeff knelt to pray next to the goat, it suddenly sprang back to life and went right back to eating garbage. Jeff's parents and the village elders were terrified that Jeff was some kind of goat necromancer and immediately cast him out of the village. From that day forward, Jeff traveled the land, stopping at villages to work as both a healer and an undertaker. He gathered skills and magical abilities relating both to life and to death, healing the sick and harming the unworthy in equal measure. And all the while, his visions got stronger. A voice would speak to him during these visions, the nameless God. It would tell him of those who live but should die and those who had died but should return. And it asked Jeff to seek them out and correct the balance between life and death. Jeff serves these visions as best he can, sometimes participating in great battles and other times assassinating those his God identifies. The targets seem to be chosen at random, with no tendencies towards good or evil or race or age. The nameless God has also spoken of those that would better serve in undeath, offering to bring back those that Jeff kills as undead as a penance for their sin. The nameless God requires little else from Jeff. There are no ceremonies or prayers he must offer as part of his service as a cleric. However, he never removes his sinister-looking skull-faced mask, and when he's asked about it, he usually responds with, "What mask? This is my face." No one is exactly sure how he eats. In a village on the outskirts of the large city of Dunwall, Jeff happened across a bloody and ranting female tiefling. She was called Nyx the Deranged. Jeff healed her body, but before he could address her psychological issues, the leader of the village betrayed them both. Worried that this cleric of death and a tiefling warlock rambling about tentacle monsters would bring doom to his village, the leader passed word to a traveling drow slave band that he had 2 new slaves for them.
Calvinis Glop is a fireball moon druid, part of a remote fireball community in a deep forest of the Khan territory. Other than hanging out with his 2 best friends, Nerozi and Enil, he was kept apart from normal society. The fireball community is governed by the code and view other forms of law as inferior and tongue-in-cheek. This puts them in an adversarial relationship with the regime of drow wizard Vizarin Devere, who rules ruthlessly over the land of Khorne. In Calvinist community, issues are voted on, when necessary, in a procedure called the Cast. Calvinist views this democratic system to be superior to any sort of authoritarian system. Although tribute is demanded from the Firebolg tribe, they live simply in the forest stronghold of Neem and do not have much to offer. Thus, they do not feel the heavy weight of Devere's rule, and they are out of the way, under the radar, and generally untaxable. That said, occasionally a caravan of drunk henchmen will stop by their region for an old-fashioned shakedown, taking what gold or gems they might find, which is a rarity. The Firebolgs tolerate this because they understand the consequences that will come if they take a full stand against the Devere regime. There have been instances of henchmen's bodies being strung up in the forest by their own entrails, and it's widely whispered that the Firebolg were responsible. Calvinus is different in many ways from his tribesmen, and this may be due to the influence of his best friends. His tribe loves him, but generally considers him unproductive and annoying. He desires wealth, which is looked down upon among his people. He also holds the belief that every female he encounters is deeply attracted to him in a romantic and sexual way. Enil and Nerozi would often ridicule him for this, but this mockery did not dissuade him. He is confident that he is a divine sexual gift to that special someone. He views himself as the most virile and debonair sexual dynamo in all of existence. And he is a virgin. Calvinus' obsession is to use his uncanny sexual attractiveness to find the coolest, sexiest babe ever, and to marry her and have 12 kids. And he wants to be really rich and famous. The Rebel Necklace is a magical item that imbues Vizarin Devere with an ungodly magical ability. After Nerozi, Enil, and Calvinus attempted to steal this necklace from the Devere estate, they were captured and sentenced to dismemberment and death in a distant drow prison. None of the 3 were allowed to say goodbye to their families. Calvinus is desperate to see his family again, but also knows that this may be his opportunity to find his super hot soulmate chick.
Roland always felt as if every drow was given a book on how to be a proper dark elf, and his just got lost in the mail. He did pretty well at fitting in with his fellow drow, made plenty of night raids on towns, killed countless villages, and took plenty of slaves in the name of their goddess Lolth, but never had the satisfaction he saw in the other drows' faces. He wanted that satisfaction. Roland made his way to the surface with one thought in his mind: I'll write my own book on life. It wasn't more than 2 days from his home before he noticed he was being followed. Roland had been cave hopping during the night and was slowly trying to adjust to the sunlight during the day. Fucking sun. How the hell do these people live with this shit? He knew he had to start trying to make up ground during the day, where his fellow drow would undoubtedly catch up, leaving him with little to no choice on how to deal with the situation. On Roland's 4th night on the run, he was preparing to head out when he felt the air around him shift. Fuck, he sighed. They were here. He hadn't been fast enough. He hadn't cleaned his trail well enough, he thought. Swiftly moved to the entrance of the cave, only to be knocked to the floor by something big. For a moment, the drow lost his footing. He rolled back and rose with his katana and sliced the figure with ease. Well, you should have seen that coming, brother. Roland stepped closer only to notice it wasn't a drow, but a Duergar in front of him. Shit, they must be raiding nearby. He quickly gathered his things and started out to make up for lost time. Roland stepped out into the night. The chill of the air brought a smile to his face. He started along the tree line, but couldn't get the thought of the Duergar raid out of his mind. This isn't your purpose. It's not your business what the Duergar do. Yet he felt himself turn and head towards the smell of fire and the sound of screams. When Roland first saw Tordik, the dwarf was covered in blood and holding the Duergar back. Tordik didn't seem to be any better equipped or fitted than any other dwarf he had come across, but he was holding his own. Roland counted 4 dead at the hands of Tordik before the Duergar overtook him. Roland's curiosity was piqued. The thought of his home and those that followed him were at the back of his mind. He tracked the Duergar to a nearby cave and slowly made his way in. When Roland headed out next, he had a new dwarf guide with an unkempt beard. He felt satisfied.
Nyx grew up as an orphan in the large, mostly human city of Dunwall. She survived by pickpocketing, panhandling, and using her natural charisma to convince others to help her. One day, she stole a satchel from a rich-looking tourist, hoping for gold and valuables. Instead, however, the bag contained only books describing a dimension of darkness and insanity, and the powerful beings that resided there. The young Nyx felt compelled to read the books and couldn't stop. She began to hear whispers in her dreams that she could never quite understand. Eventually, she started hearing these whispers while awake as well. She began to speak of these eldritch beings to her fellow street orphans, homeless people, and otherwise downtrodden in her city. Her charismatic nature allowed her to gather a dedicated following, which eventually grew into a cult dedicated to that which lurks, the most powerful elder god spoken of in the musty tomes. Nyx became increasingly unbalanced and paranoid as well, and her cultist followers eventually plotted to get rid of her. The cult later staged an attack, leaving her for dead on the outskirts of Dunwall. By coincidence or fate, Nyx was found soon after by Jeff Bigglesworth, a wandering healer and undertaker. A vision from Jeff's nameless god convinced him to try to heal her, or, if that failed, destroy her body so she could never return in undeath. After Jeff stabilized Nyx's physical wounds, but before he could tend to her damaged mind, the leader of the nearby village betrayed them both. Worried that this cleric of death and a tiefling warlock would bring doom to his village, the leader passed word to a traveling drow slave band that he had 2 new slaves for them.
Enil is from a reformed Tabaxi family, acclimated to human society in the peach-growing territory of Khon. His parents had to flee their homeland long ago due to drought, and are now upstanding members of the Khonian community. Arbitrarily adopting the last name of Remington, Enil's family became wealthy as his parents brought with them a small treasure trove of valuable trinkets they had accumulated over the years. Unlike most Tabaxi, who are known by a single name such as Smoke or Cloud, Enil was given a human name. He grew up playing in the peach orchards of Khon with his best friends, an Asimir protector named Nirozi, and a firebulg moon druid named Calvinus Glop. Nirozi and Calvinus tease him about his songs being dumb and annoying, but he is convinced they are really great. He, in turn, teases Calvinus about believing he is a divine gift to women. Although he grooms himself and does not stink, Emil hates the water and avoids it unless absolutely necessary. Musically and poetically inclined, a wonderful bard, his instructor was obsessed with the Feywild bardic style and imbued this obsession. He desires to take part in the rare and deadly Feywild College of Glamour. Meow! Khon is ruled tyrannically by a deadly drow wizard named Vizerin Devere. Enil's parents never rebelled against Devere, but Nirozi's father did and paid a dear price for it. His eyes. Nirozi's parents have always looked upon Enil's family with quiet contempt. Enil does not desire riches. They are of little account to him. Instead, he becomes obsessive over stories, trivia, and trinkets. His current obsession is the golden eyeball necklace in the keeping of Vizorin Devere. This enchanted item is known as the Rebel Necklace and seems to imbue Devere with an ungodly magical ability. In an attempt to steal the necklace, which includes the eyeballs of Nerosi's father, the three best friends were captured and sentenced to imprisonment and dismemberment in a distant drow prison.
Tordik groaned, stretched, and stepped outside. Looking up at the moon, he contemplated. What's it all for? The clans, their handed-down names, their honor, pride, valor? What does it matter? The gods? Are they what drive us to fulfill these chasms within us? Tordik drew in the chilly night air with a deep breath, exhaled with a long sigh. Fuck it. Tordik grabbed his gear, made sure to grab his pipe, and walked into the night. Although his gear was heavy, Tordik had never felt so light. When Tordik first met Roland, it wasn't the drow's dark skin, bright white hair, or pale blue eyes that grabbed his attention. It was Roland's sword. It wasn't something Tordik felt was befitting of one of the most reviled races in all the realms. It had a slight curve. It was not that of a scimitar, and had no other special features or adornments. Yet it cut through the Duergar like a knife through butter. Roland wielded it as if it was just another part of his body. Tordik had found himself a victim of the Duergar raiding party, and although he felt satisfied with killing 4 before being overtaken, that feeling left when he saw Roland dispatch 3 Duergar with one flash of his strange sword. When the last Duergar fell dead by Roland's sword, Tordik was almost set aside with the relief that he was about to die by this drow's hand, like it would be an honor. But Tordik smiled and said the first thing that came to his mind. Your sword looks like shit, but you wield it well, drow. Roland quickly swiped his sword towards the ground, removing most of the Duergar blood from the blade, before he ceremoniously put it back in its scabbard. Roland turned, looked at Tordik, with a crooked smile, outstretched his hand, helped him to his feet, and said, Not as shite as your beard, dwarf. The name's Roland. Tordik laughed while he introduced himself, and then exclaimed, The Duergar attacked before I could groom it last night. Tordik's face went a bit serious after a moment, and he stood a bit taller, for a dwarf at least, and said, You saved me life, Roland. I owe you a bit of thanks for that. Yeah, I suppose you do. Roland contemplated for a moment and then said, I'll need help if I'm to survive during the day. I'm still getting used to traveling while the sun is out, and I need to get as far from my homeland as possible. That sound fair? Tordik laughed and said, You can kill a Duergar with a flick of the wrist, but need a dwarf to guide you in sunlight. Ha! Can't make that shite up. Shortly after, they mended their wounds and set off.
Thorn was the son of wealthy, doting dwarf parents who gave him everything he ever wanted from a young age. He wore all the finest clothes, had the best dwarven toys, and despite having a reputation for being very stupid, Thorn was sent to a prestigious boarding school in the countryside near a huge forest. Although he had a lot of friends, Thorn did poorly in school. He was failing most of his classes and constantly smoked any medicinal herbs he could find. Just before the school was going to kick him out, though, news arrived that his parents had been tragically eaten by cave trolls. Distraught, Thorn fled the school for the nearby forest. He decided that he had no use for his inheritance or material possessions in general, and that he would live in the forest with the woodland creatures and herbs as his companions. Thorn spent the next several years, or maybe decades, he didn't really keep track, living by himself in the forest, getting high, and generally having a great time. One day, though, Thorn heard a large commotion on the outskirts of his forest and went to investigate. Investigate, for Thorn, meant that he just walked up and started talking to the first guy he saw, who happened to be a drow slave trader. The drow quickly realized the stupid, hardy dwarf would fetch a good price on the slave market, and asked Thorin if he wanted to come check out his awesome pipe collection back at his place, to which Thorin immediately agreed. He didn't even mind that he had to be chained up and stuck in a wagon to get there. Thorin quickly tried to become friends with the other slaves. The human with the skull mask didn't seem particularly interested in him, but the red tiefling named Nyx took great interest in Thorin, telling him how she saw great potential for him. Thorin was not bothered in the slightest by the creepy way she said it or the almost hungry look in her eyes.
The territory of Khan has two claims to fame: its delicious peaches and the organized crime syndicate run by the drow wizard, Vizerin Devere. The wizard's ruthless oppression, including the outlaw of the residents' rights to self-defense, caused peasants far and wide to cry out to the heavens for salvation. In response, an angelic guide, Seraphina, granted that an Aasimar child be born to peasant peach farmers. They named the Aasimar child Nerozi. It was commonly whispered that Nerozi would be responsible for the fall of Vizerin Devere. Nerozi's father, Griffin Teskel, was once a decorated war hero and valiant warlock. When Nerozi was only 2 years old, Griffin took part in a rebellion against Devere, one which failed utterly. Devere made an example of Griffin, not by killing him, but by cutting out his eyes with a white-hot blade during a public assembly. The eyes of the rebels were then covered in molten gold and forged into a gorgeous and ornate necklace, enchanted to grant Devere an ungodly magical power. Devere wears this necklace on the rare occasions he appears in public, as a reminder to would-be rebels that resistance is futile. This enchanted item is known in Khan as the Rebel Necklace. Because every Aasimar has encountered the Celestial, Nerozi found himself deeply connected to the divine realm, with a strong love for good and hatred for evil. As a protector, his commitment to aiding the weak was only surpassed by his lust for destroying evil. Nerozi abhorred the apathy of allegedly good persons who tolerated evil. To him, this was the gravest evil of all. From birth, Nerozi received wise, mirthful guidance from his angelic guide, Seraphina, and regarded her as his best friend. He had two other lifelong companions in Khan, a Tabaxi bard named Enil, and a Firebolg moon druid named Calvinus. The three would play together in the peach orchards, pretending that they were fighting Devere and his goons. Even though Griffin was blind and unable to work, he was able to train Nerozi as a warlock to the best of his ability. Nerozi's obsession is vengeance against Vizerin Devere and the liberation of the people of Khan. The time eventually came where Nerozi was confident enough to make a move against Devere. Aided by Enil and Calvinus, Nerozi penetrated Devere's lavish estate in an attempt to steal the Rebel Necklace. As might be expected, the three were captured. Instead of killing the audacious trio, Devere decided they should be doomed to the murky depths of a torturous drow prison with one request: that they incrementally be sent back to their families in Khan, in pieces.
Vicious